these balanced armies were kind of templates for choosing their pieces so that they could get a balanced force that could do reasonably well, more or less, regardless of whatever force they find themselves facing off with. And so I assert that this is the advantage of both the fundamentals of biological progression, as well as with regard to societal, cultural, or mimetic successions. The basic and general templates that have the most staying power in the most situations, while not being a single choice or a single path. I'm not saying again that there's a set way it can necessarily be, or a set way in which it has to be for survival or whatever, but there's basic and general templates that have the most staying power, and so you need to strive to remain within the bounds of what could be considered balanced. Now, in the human competition scenario, I'm going to give you a scenario in relation to this. In the expected conditions, you would, in your transcendental, ultra-sapient condition, dominate. But say that to some degree or another there was a protracted incident in which conditions that enabled your supremacy were compromised. This ultimately is not terribly an unforeseeable thing, as humanity has kind of been really notoriously weak when it comes to predicting actual causation of catastrophes that afflict us through the ages. It could be something like an unanticipated electromagnetic blast, or some failure of an industry, or any number of previously unconfronted realities. And that's kind of one of the things with disasters, is a lot of times they happen simply because they weren't foreseen. And suddenly items that would have been strengths that you would likely have had, they have force multipliers in them that multiply your strengths on one hand, but it can go the other way too. They can have force multipliers that can make it a loss for you. A man used to navigating at night with night vision will not do as well at night if he was to lose his night vision as somebody who had learned to navigate in the night without night vision. So you get these force multipliers working in both directions. We talked a bit about the richness added access to humanity brings, as found through computing and the internet. Yet, say some event happens, out of any number of events that could, say to some there's, effects such as massive, long extended blackouts, which are still very much a possibility. Say you had one of those and they lose access for an extended period of time, or in some cases seemingly indefinitely. And again, if you've seen the Brian Eno and Will Wright vid, they reference a demonstration of how fragile generative systems are. To then think that various kinds of infrastructure, how we get our food, power, information, our mobility, they're all part of, if you think this is all distant from being part of a fragile system, I think that's a really naive view. And if you want a demonstration of this, I'll link the first episode of a very entertaining and good series. This series is titled Connections. It's an old one, so forgive the rough medium, but it's a really good series. It's hosted by a journalist historian from England by the name of James Burke. And it's the first episode of this Connections. Demonstrates a very small part of what he terms the technology trap that the world has become for us. Just as I would encourage you to watch, or I better said, just as you encouraged everybody to watch your series, I would encourage, as a kind of a counterpoint, to watch at least the whole first episode. And the rest of the series is entertaining, but the first episode kind of sums up a lot of seeing both sides of the coin with regard to technological advancement. And again, this isn't to scare people away from advancing. By all means, hope it marches on, and it's swift and empowering. But I think we need to realize that if we allow ourselves to get too caught up in this, especially if we invest our identity as individuals or as humanity in it, that it could have severe repercussions in the future. It's easy to get caught up in optimism of the possible, and I don't advocate pessimism. But if we don't know what to watch for, we can get easily blindsided. So, again, not trying to sound pessimistic, but think of that communal tension and the momentum that would exist in a society that had a very large portion of their social contacts, the personal needs for fulfillment, that was based off of a system that could either completely or partially fail for all at the same time or for extended periods of time. We talk about letting people be who they are in virtual interfaces, and allowing a consolation of such retreats for some of those who struggle perchance in other face-to-face instances. But this often seems like helping a chick out of its egg when it's hatching. If we get too connected on if our interconnectedness is too dependent on connections via electronics, then I don't think humanity as individuals and as a whole society will ever feel more isolated in the history of the Earth than if these systems were to fail, when it was over. Because it really is, I think it's more valuable than most people realize, having at least some significant region of the world being cut off for an extended period of time, for any flowing out of any number of scenarios. So, if we ever wanted to see humanity at its worst, I think this would be one potential way of getting as many people as delusioned as possible. And if primary or whole of human interaction or their feeling of value or humanness was coming through wires and Wi-Fi signals, then what happens when it gets switched off? I'm going to make this a bit more simple in another illustration. You've got the condom. I don't agree with the manner and frequency in which some people use it, but I certainly believe it has a proper place in society. It's a wonderful innovation, and the fact that it's mass-produced and sanitary it has many good uses for society. As I understand it and view it, condoms have a good place in our society. And while I've never used one, I haven't made the opportunity to use one, I don't think it's an inherently evil object. But I want you to look for a second on the implications of a scenario involving the use of condoms. Since many people can't fathom, a breakdown of the kind that I think we could have in the first world, let's go to Africa. Condom promotion in many instances is demonstrably tied to improved numbers in favor of humans' fight against scourges like AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases, as well as limiting undesired pregnancies. But think about the process behind condoms. As far as it's not terribly complex to produce. It's not a complex product itself, and certainly there's know-how, there's certain products and refinements and automation that's needed to produce them at the level they are, but really it's not some product that takes a whole lot in our present situation to procure adequately and sufficiently. To say that something happens, something entirely plausible and likely, something like a flu pandemic or a massive war or any number of things that could limit the delivery of fuels and commodities to significant portions of Africa. Now imagine this cutoff of supplies of condoms to a good portion of that continent for several months, or potentially longer. Throw into that the social, emotional, and biological momentum found in a populace that for most of their lives have been free to engage in what we term safe sex.